told or have been a part of?
Huh. Well, the craziest ET story are the ones that are the stories, and I've seen this personally, where unacknowledged special access projects, and this is the deepest compartmented operation there is, manufacture creatures that look like aliens that are man-made, put them on anti-gravity devices made by Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, abduct people using chemicals, radio frequency chips, implants, all kinds of stuff, and then sell it to the public as an alien abduction. That, when I uncovered exactly how that works and who was doing it and why, that was the craziest thing. And actually, it bent credulity. I mean, the credulity was pressed to the limit. I couldn't believe it. And then when I actually saw, and we were doing a CE5 near Joshua Tree, and parts of our team had one of these programmed artificial life forms sent to their house and was climbing on their roof and banging on their windows. And it was absolutely one of the man-made ones that was done to scare the hell out of people. And when, of course, they knew it. Luckily, these were all people who had listened and read the information I put out about the real ET phenomenon versus the false phenomenon and the false flag stuff. But the average person out there has no idea. And I would say 99% of UFO researchers have no idea. So that is by far the craziest stuff that's going on out there that most people, they just can't believe that we would have the ability to do. And I said, come on, we've had anti-grav things flying around that we've made since 1954, and we've had biotechnologies dealing with this stuff since the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I said, you've really got to begin to understand what the agenda is behind all the hoaxing that's going on. And why the hell are they wanting to scare people like this? Because they want another war. You know, they need something 10 times bigger than 9/11, and what they want to do is concoct an interplanetary conflict. That was planned in the 50s.
An economist professor that I had when I was in my undergrad said the best way to fix an economy for a country is to start a war. And another thing I want to say is what you mentioned with ARVs, that's a term you coined, alien reproduction vehicle, is exactly what they're using to scare us into oblivion. And as you brought forward Carol Rosin, who talked about Werner von Braun, who said that the final card they'll play is the alien invasion. And they're already doing it by scaring people.
Yeah, well, they actually have been ramping it up since the 50s and 60s with a lot of false information and events. And so people said, oh, well, don't you think people have been victims of these abductions? I said, oh, they absolutely have. But they're not what they think they are. And to get to that, now have I met with people who have actually been in those unacknowledged special access projects doing this? Yes, multiple people. I have not been able to get them to come forward publicly because they're afraid for their lives. But if I'd heard this from one person, I would have said it's a crackpot. But I've heard it from more than a dozen. And I've seen the evidence, and I know for a fact it's going on. Same thing with mutilations. So you have to begin to question everything that's out there. Is it real, or is it something we're concocting and hoaxing for its psychological warfare value? I'm quoting from a CIA document from 1953. The psychological warfare value of the subject. And this is another big part of what I'm going to cover on November 21st in Washington, and those who want to have the webinar. I'm going to go deep into how the game of war is played and how a population is conditioned through propaganda and staging things to accept the cost and blood and treasure of war, and that we better wake up this time. This is not something like 9/11 or even Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam. This would be much worse. So we've got to wake up, but there has to be a global awakening to this.
And that's why I'm so glad you jumped onto consciousness, which is definitely something we have to cover after the break. And I believe you were among the first to bring it to the mainstream because a lot of research have finally jumped on this. Civilizations, in order to become I guess, advance to travel interstellar and to maybe even enter through other galaxies, be intergalactic, they're not going to be primitive like us and fight wars between nations and invisible lines. They're peaceful. And as you mentioned in the past, there's a galactic federation that is waiting for us, inviting us to stop this warfare, stop this madness, and let us have what we are owed, such as the technology. But these power companies don't want us to have them. But we can join a peaceful civilization, or should I say group of civilizations out there that are literally that you can contact. And Preston Dennett was there in Florida, I believe, 20 years ago when you did a CE5 experiment, amongst your first, I don't know if it was your first, and he actually saw a craft responding to your meditation, and they responded to, I believe, some of the lights and lasers you had.
Yeah, there were 4 of them that appeared. And by the way, people who want to follow us can also follow us on Twitter, and it's at Dr. Stephen Greer, Stephen with a V, and it's Dr. DrSteven Greer. And also on Facebook, you can follow us at on Facebook at Facebook/SeriousDisclosure.com. So. And also, people want to sign up for our newsletters and free information and all this stuff, and we're putting out a lot of this information through our YouTube channel and whatnot. You can sign up for free at SeriousDisclosure.com. It's a free website, and there's no subscription, there's no charge, and people can get this information. So and you can put your email address in, and we'll send you stuff. So. Just wanted to let people know that, because a lot of people say, how can I find out about these things? And that's how they can do it.
Now, these technologies that we've been sitting on for 60 years at least, obviously the power companies don't want us to have them because then they would lose the power they have on us financially. You've already seen the middle class being wiped out. The richest of the rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. My family came here from dirt poor villages in Greece and came here for the American dream in the 60s and thrived. And they were able to do very well for themselves. But now with these extraordinarily high taxes and permits and this and that, they're doing everything in their power to cut us down. Yet when we have the capability, as you've talked about in the past, to literally harness energy from wherever we are. We don't need to be paying the Department of Water and Power or whoever is in charge, Edison, because it's been available. Nikola Tesla, even he was suppressed 100 plus years ago.
Well, and this continues to take place because they want to be able to control macroeconomically the population, and it's through a couple of mechanisms. One is the macroeconomic control, where basically it's masters and slaves, and guess what? We're all slaves on someone's plantation. It's just the United States is a wealthier plantation than the Congo. But it's a very, very corrupt system, all the way from the gang banksters, the big banking empires, all the way down. But the other issue is the other way to control people is through fear and war, and which is why people have to be aware of what's a false flag is part of this phenomenon of UFOs and ETs, and what part of it is ET, and how to discern that. Because if you're not, then it's very easy to deceive the population, because the technologies that these covert USAPs have are so slick, they're so advanced, and most people wouldn't believe that they're not alien, because they don't know the kind of leaps and bounds that have been made since the 40s. When a high-level group started studying the ET materials from Roswell till now. But, you're talking almost 70 years, John. So in 70 years, can you imagine the kind, with trillions and trillions of dollars in covert funding, the kind of technological advances there have been? I mean, there's nothing in Silicon Valley that's an advanced technology at all.
And not to mention, from that Navy SEAL friend of mine, he said, of course, the military has better technology than any civilian does, but the further advanced they get within the military, for instance, a Navy SEAL or Green Berets or Delta Force, the technology they have, in his words, are 15 on November 21st, 2 weeks from Saturday, as a matter of fact, in DC, where the entire world can see it through a webinar, expose on who's in the know, who's kept the secret, and of course, you give a great plan of attack of how we can break the secrecy. Not to mention, let's talk about the ET contact tool. I've turned a lot of people onto it, and then of course, there's a lot of people that have found it on their own and try to introduce it to me. And I said, hey, I'm way ahead of you. This is such a cool little thing to have. Not to mention what you have set up, the network for all the people to get together. As I was mentioning at the beginning of the show, I've received a lot of emails of people, random people living in different areas within 30 square miles of where I live, or 30 miles radius, should I say, of where I live, different directions, trying to form CE5 groups, trying to contact ETs themselves. And I've known at least 5 people who on their own, using your protocols or a variation of them, but essentially evolving the same thing: meditation, remote viewing, and asking them for come to us. You offer so much on your website, serious disclosure. And that is not like I'm being serious. We're talking as serious as the STAR system. Serious, SIRIUS disclosure. Let's talk about that, the event, ET Contact Tool, and anything else you'd like to plug in.
Yeah, sure. Well, the SeriousDisclosure.com site has all the information about the event in Washington on November 21st, and also how to sign up for the webinar, as well as come there in person for those who can get to Washington. And it's going to be a 4-hour event from 2 in the afternoon till 6 in the evening. And I think it's going to be, excuse me, it's not just going to be the information. It's also going to be a lot of the documents and other evidence we've gotten pertaining to the Deep National Security State and Transnational Security State that deals with UFOs and ETs. We're going to put up there for people to see. And I'm going to go through them and sort of explain how to understand it, all the way going back to from the 40s until now, and how the whole system has devolved into the mess it's in today. And I think it's really, really going to be, excuse me, very important for people to also understand who's behind it and what are the various competing agendas. Because many people say, oh, well, there's one agenda out there. Well, in reality, these unacknowledged special access projects are multiple compartmented operations, some of which are at odds with others. And it's a much more complex picture than what is normally portrayed when people start talking about this level of secrecy. So that's what people need to understand. And also what the good news is around that. A lot of people don't realize that between 1993 and today, when I first waded into this issue, only about 25 to 30% of the command and control involved the policy board dealing with this subject and all wanted it to come out. Now it's about 70%.
It's exactly. It's risen. So we have the majority.
So that's has happened because this whole situation has evolved. And there are people who were involved in those covert projects who didn't realize what some of their companions or some of these other operations were doing, some of the nastier end of it. So people need to understand it's a dynamic situation. It's not, you can't take information from the 40s or 60s or 80s or 90s or even 2000s. It's a very evolving, dynamic situation that's in flux.
Exactly. And here we sit in 2015, and it's far different than what it used to be. But I hope we're really at the brink of all these people, firsthand gentlemen and women involved in these USAPs that either have documents and can be verified. And again, as we said earlier, there are power in numbers. Of course, propaganda puts a lot of fear in our minds. Fear controls. That is why when you turn on the news, you see murder after murder after murder. And then, of course, all these people that are involved in these unacknowledged special access projects are threatened with the penalty of death. Real quick, let's talk about the ET contact tool, which is really nifty, available for anyone who has a smartphone. A very, very affordable, cheap price, not to mention your ET CE5 network.
Yeah, well, those are, if you go to our website, SeriousDisclosure.com, you'll see that if you scroll down towards the bottom, there's a link to this contact app, ET Contact app, and it literally is an entire training program, everything from remote viewing, meditation, electromagnetic tones. It actually will turn your smartphone into a magnetic field detector, so when a craft is emerging into this dimension, it will actually begin to go off. It's a really sophisticated app. It's a big file, so it's a big one to download, and it's at both the Android and the iPhone stores. And then there's a free app that's the ET Contact Network, where you can put that on your phone and look and see where other people are who are interested in going out under the stars together, practicing these techniques, and forming a contact group. And it literally now, of course, it's predicated on people actually putting an email address in there so people can communicate, and many people haven't. I would encourage people that if they don't want to use their primary, get another one, but do put some kind of contact information, because what we're doing, we're beginning actually this Saturday. Every month we're going to have the first Saturday in the month, a global CE5 meditation consciousness mass contact event, and the first one is November 7th, which is this Saturday. And the way that you can link up with other people who are interested in doing this is through the networking app, which there's a link to that one also that's on our website, SeriousDisclosure.com. And we've had that for a couple years now, and what's interesting is virtually every country in the world and every state have people who have signed up. So it enables people to find like-minded folks, find a place they want to, preferably someplace quiet and remote, to do this and begin to practice the contact protocols. I can't tell you how important that is, because when you have a lot of people doing something in higher consciousness that's for peaceful purposes, for beneficial purposes, it can shift the entire thought process and consciousness of the planet. Not just the people doing it, but through the non-local nature of mind and consciousness, it can actually move the entire planet. And there are scientific studies that have proven that this is the case, that consciousness is actually not limited to activity in your own brain, that there's this what's called non-local aspect of awareness, where it's really omnipresent. It's a field that goes beyond the limits of space and time. And when you begin to understand the true nature of consciousness, and you do something with other people of like mind that is positive and that is life-affirming, what happens is that it actually changes the whole direction of the planet. So that's why group meditation, prayer, meditative states, all these things actually work, because the nature of the conscious mind that everyone has within them. And a lot of people say, how do you get to that place? I said, you're always in that place. If you're awake, the nature of the awake mind itself is that it's always omnipresent. We may not perceive it directly, but it's always operating that way. That field of consciousness is an infinite field of awareness that we're plugged into, whether waking, dreaming, or sleeping. And that's why remote viewing works. The reason you can go into a quiet state of mind and see a remote place or even a remote time is because consciousness is not limited to space and time. It transcends those boundaries. And that is the true nature of everyone's mind. You don't have to be Ingo Swann, who, by the way, I knew personally. He and I used to talk about this a lot, that people don't give themselves enough credit for the fact that every single awake human being, and every ET for that matter, because they're conscious and sentient also, have this ability within themselves. And if we use it for positive, life-affirming purposes, it can have an enormous effect. And so this global CE5 effort for mass peaceful contact, which we're starting on November 7th, is really important. And this is something everyone can do, even if you don't know someone who's worked in a secret project, and encourage them to come forward. I mean, people who do should network those to us. But this is something every single person listening can do. It isn't hard to do. It's fun. When people, instead of sitting there in front of your computers and television sets, go outside with 3 or 4 or 5 other people and do this, and you might be really amazed at what happens.
I'm so glad you brought up the consciousness. There's a few things I want to say, and then I have a question for you. First of all, the study Maharishi effect, let's just put numbers to the equation. If one person meditates, we give one unit of meditation power. If 10 people meditate, again, I'm just making up numbers, 100 people, therefore it's exponential. So when you get the entire globe in different groups meditating on the same thought, on peace, and of course for visitation, you will get effects. They did this effect in this test in DC. I don't remember the year, but it was to reduce crime, and they were actually able to substantially. Yes. Another thing, a lot of people.
Well, not only that, but Dr. John it's spelled Jahn, and he was Princeton, a professor emeritus in engineering. He had the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, PEAR lab, PEAR. You can look it up. What's interesting, he found that even with a random number generator, let's just spitting out zeros or ones, that if one person put their awareness on it, they could actually, without touching or being wired to the machine, shift the random number generator in one direction or another. But if 2 people that were united or loved each other or had a sense of unity with each other did it, the effect was exponential. So this has been replicated in other laboratory and scientific settings. So this is why the concept, and by the way, the reason consciousness and thought are so key to what I'm talking about is that an interstellar civilization that goes faster than the speed of light, they're not using signals from an iPhone. They're not using like a radio signal that goes at the speed of light because it's too slow. So the first thing people have to begin to think about, meditate on, is that how would these civilizations communicate? Let's get out of our own anthropocentric state of early 21st century Earth and begin to think, if you were interstellar and you could go beyond the speed of light for travel, but for communication, you needed instantaneous communication across thousands or even millions of light years of space. You cannot use a radio signal. You're going to be using a superluminal system, a faster than the speed of light system that interfaces with thought, consciousness, and machine. And actually, the Facebook founder, Zuckerberg, has recently talked about, in the future being able to have the mind and thought interface with technology directly. I don't know if he's been reading my materials or what have you, but this is actually how these interstellar civilizations communicate. Now, they do it innately through remote viewing, some would say telepathy, but they also do it because they have technologies that interface with thought and consciousness. And I wrote a paper in 1991 about this, about technology-assisted consciousness. These are technologies that assist your thought and conscious ability to remote view, but also consciousness-assisted technology. So it goes both directions, where the mind is assisting the technology. And anyone who's had an onboard encounter with the actual ET civilization, they'll see that they're actually just touching and thinking and navigating the spacecraft. So there is this interface, and the reason it works is because there is a reproducibility to the science of consciousness and the science of mind. A lot of people don't realize that before I was an emergency doctor, I was a meditation teacher, and I studied the ancient Vedas and meditation teachings when I was in my teens and early 20s, and actually spent 8 hours a day in deep meditative states and began to develop this ability when I was a very young man, between 18 and 22. And what I found was that it really isn't difficult if you give some attention to it to enter into this quiet state of mind and begin to awaken to other points in space and time and see things. And so, but it takes a little bit of discipline. I mean, it's a practice like anything. And I'm a natural bodybuilder. I was, yesterday I was at the gym doing back rows with 469 pounds. You don't do that. You don't start at 460 pounds. So, you build up to this. And I think it's hilarious because my grandkids get a kick that I'm, 60 years old doing this kind of workout. But I think people need to understand mentally you can practice this and develop it, but if you're with a group of people and there's coherence in the group, it's actually easier to do. That's what's really amazing about it. It's actually, you kind of get into this state together, and then the effect that you're talking about, this exponential rise in effect, happens when there's a group doing it. Now imagine thousands of people. So right now, we have literally thousands of these teams all over the world on every country and every continent. And so that's why we're organizing this mass contact consciousness event for Saturday. And it's going to happen every month on the first Saturday of every month.
I'm glad you brought up quantum thinking and, of course, thought-driven machinery. There's a mainstream physicist in the UK, David Darling, who was just talking that he sees that as the future of technology, which I believe we already have. Words are very two-dimensional, as you know. I don't think Homo sapien was meant to communicate via two-dimensional words. We're supposed to be able to express feelings and show visions of memories and stuff like that. Yet we somehow lost that ability or were suppressed by the powers that be, so we had to speak in tongues via words. So we create what's three dimensionals in our brain, or even if you want to call it a higher dimension, with thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, and put them into words and communicate with another person, which is why there's so much miscommunication. If we had that ability, I don't think we'd be anywhere near the brink of warfare where we always are.
Well, and not only that, but the people would not be able to be so weak. Weak-mindedness is the result of living only in the linear self and not understanding this larger aspect of ourselves. And real strength and power comes from within that state. It isn't an external thing. And, even in business models, they've done studies that there's an inverse relationship between power and force. So if something's forced, it's 1/10 as effective as something that comes from intrinsic real power. And this is what comes from within. And so this, I think any interstellar civilization has to understand this, because you couldn't reach interstellar capability for travel unless you had this understanding of transdimensional, not only propulsion systems, but also communication systems, and what the nature of the multiverse is, what the nature of this transdimensional universe is, where it's not just stars and stardust and space and time, but there are these other dimensions of the realms of thought and consciousness and worlds of thought and consciousness, and on and on and on. And this is, I think, well understood by any interstellar civilization, because they have to traverse those dimensions to go from point A to B across space. Because if they go through from A to B in a straight line, it's going to take them thousands of years, and they'd be dead. So I think this is something that when we really begin to think about this, and we realize, gosh, we're being visited, but let's not make these extraterrestrial visitors, creatures that are living in a Newtonian world, just because our scientists and religious leaders have suppressed the truth about all this. You see what I'm saying? We have to begin to think about what the true phenomenon is, and then if we want to be in a relationship, an emerging interstellar, interplanetary relationship with these civilizations, which we must do, we have to begin to think, what is the paradigm? What are the principles of that? And that's what I try to teach through this app and through the other training materials that are on the website. And also, and when we go out into the stars, and do this together. And, I really hope at some point, we talked about this, Dr. J, of organizing a huge mass event somewhere in the desert Southwest or California when it's not rainy and clear. And it'd be sort of like a cosmic consciousness contact Burning Man, perhaps without all the drugs and stuff. And really do that. I would love to do that in 2016 if we can find the right place to do it. And I don't know how many people would want to come, but I think if the more people that could come, it'd be awesome. Because I think a mass event like that, And my view of it is that it would be meditative, it would be contact, but then there would also be really cool music and really cool, all kinds of stuff that would be kind of like a festival over a couple of days. But if anyone knows of a place where we might be able to hold this, it's really accommodating, but very dark and very quiet and very much great sky, view of the galaxy and sky, let us know, because this is something I'd actually would like to do. And when I was coming back from the gym tonight, I was thinking about, this idea that you and I kicked around about doing this somewhere, out in the desert or some remote area. And I'd love to see us do that sometime in 2016.
When I used to produce events, concerts, anything from fundraising to talent events, to canned food drives, to my own monetary, I guess, way to pay my bills, my own events, I'd have people over 10,000 or more people attending these events. The way to reach the young people is, just like you said, you took the words right out of my mouth: music and festival. So we have the lectures during the day, show slides, you talk, we have the meditations, and then at night, give them the party, give them the DJs and the bands that they want. That is how we will merge the different generations of the younger generation.
And in between all those things, we could do like little modules of meditation and contact things interspersed between all the dancing and music. I think it'd be so much fun if people listen. Anyone who's listening who has an idea of where this could be held, that would have adequate facilities, would be very dark and very private, and really it could accommodate a big crowd, let us know, because you and I have talked about it. I think it'd be a wonderful thing to do. And also, there's some really talented live musicians who are really into the work we're doing. I told you, I've hung out with people like, Tom DeLonge and Blink-182,
yep.
And the Foo Fighters are really into this. There are all kinds of folks who are really interested in this subject, and, whether any could come live or not. But I think we would want to have it be this mix of things where it really ignites excitement, and then that could also be live streamed onto the internet too.
There's another band, Hollywood Undead. I don't know if you've heard of them. They tour a lot with Nine Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, and those are just the groups that I remember off the top of my head, because they talk in depth with them about extraterrestrials, conspiracies, and Tom DeLonge, of course, as you talked about, he is so much into this. I believe that was one of the reasons why he left the group, to focus on this. He must have had some sort of changing. And there's a person out here named Fausto Perez who learned your methods and sort of had a variation of them, where Tom just showed up to his house, or actually reached out to him through a Facebook, asked him for his phone number, closed that account, called him. A few hours later, was at his house, and they went to a park and did a meditation and a contacting, photographed, filmed it, and then, of course, got a little picture with him signing the guitar. Nonetheless, you're absolutely right. If we get 10 to 20,000 plus people in the crowd and on stage when the musicians are doing their thing, then taking a break and say, okay, let's lead us into a meditation so we can reach our brothers and sisters out in the stars and even in other galaxies, we will have results. Jack Osborne is another person who is deeply interested in this. I just spoke to him yesterday. In fact, he is doing a major documentary on for History Channel on ufology in general, and he wants to go deep into this, and he's always calling me to get more information. Something must have happened in his life that changed it. And he says that when he was a young child, and his father Ozzy, when he was touring with Black Sabbath before he broke off on his own to be Ozzy Osbourne, he would always bring him books on UFOs, videos, right, movies, and so and there was even a sighting at a Black Sabbath
Right. Oh, yeah, that's happened at other places too, where they've had big laser shows and these craft come over. That's happened more than once. Yes. So sort of a CE5 kind of thing. So I think it's, this would be an exciting thing to do. So, people could contact Dr. J or me if they have ideas of kind of where this could really be hosted. But, I just think it'd be, not only would it be a lot of fun, I think it would create a great mass consciousness event that would appeal to people, all kinds of people from all walks of life, and it's something that, I've never done something like that, but I think it'd be amazing to do it.
And on top of that, we'll promote it to the world. For those who can't be there, at least they can also be part of the meditation globally, just like you're having Global Meditation Day for Global Contact Day this Saturday and every Saturday from then on. We can make this happen, Dr. Greer. 2016 will be the year. We are getting that much closer to people realizing you cannot separate science with regards to UFOs and extraterrestrials with consciousness. They are one and the same. We do have
this is why you can go to India and talk. In fact, I'm dealing with some people in India now who really understand the ancient Vedas and higher states of consciousness. And same thing with Buddhists, who understand where this nexus is, where sort of trans-dimensional sciences comes together with consciousness and higher states of consciousness and these other civilizations. Because really, if you look at ancient civilizations, I think almost every ancient civilization has had contact and has understood that what they may call the spirit world or the levels of consciousness is key to the contact they've had with ETs and so-called star people. And I know Native Americans have accounts of this, and Hopis, right. But also if you go to South America, Aboriginals in Australia, all over the world, and personally, and also in India. And I think this is why, we need to say, okay, there are hard sciences associated with the technologies, but there are also the science of consciousness. And actually, when you start dealing with interstellar, transdimensional technologies, it's where they all have to come together. They have to come together there, because you simply cannot communicate across these distances in space without also dealing with consciousness and non-local fields of energy and thought. And that's what we're dealing with here. And I think, to me, that's kind of the most exciting part of all the research we're doing, because the other part of it, I have to tell people, the disclosure part of it, and even bringing out the technologies, the free energy technologies, that's all information that should have come out in the 40s and 50s, and I was born in 1955. I'm no spring chicken, but but this is the information that I think is the most fascinating, but also can have a huge effect, because anyone can come together as a group of people, begin to practice this, understand the nature of their own mind and consciousness, and have amazing experience. We had a truck driver from Eastern Europe write to us after this app went out, and he was driving a truck, and he pulled over for a rest and started practicing the meditation and remote viewing, and an ET craft came right over his truck. And he said it was unbelievable. So people, it's kind of amazing, because what I think, and this is why from the very first time that we organized these groups to go out, we had results. And the reason is, I think the ETs out there are waiting for humans to awaken to this aspect of knowledge and to reach out to them, because they're not going to just invade the planet and force themselves on us. They want us to awaken and do this in a way that is nonviolent, that's peaceful, and isn't frightening to everyone. Well, to do that, we've got to do some education of our own selves. And this is why, in a sense, a president or a congressman or whatever can only do so much. Ultimately, I think if there's a mass movement on this level, it will drive the good future to us. And that's the power of lots of people beginning to do this.
I'm glad you mentioned the ancient cultures, because every ancient civilization had some sort of writing that talked about contact with these other beings. Some called them angels, and others demons. Whatever they called them, there was another and other entities visiting us and teaching us wisdom, giving us tools, everything. And yet somehow either the powers that be suppressed it, or we seem to have lost it. Dr. Greer, we have about 20 minutes left of the show, and I wanted to tell everyone if you could explain the steps for CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, Human-Initiated Contact with Extraterrestrials.
Well, what we do, I mean, the core of it is, excuse me, is the understanding of consciousness. And we do a group meditation where we go deep into silent awareness. And that is all on the app, by the way, including a whole meditation course. And then after everyone is in a quiet state of awareness, we begin to do this expansion of awareness of the area around us and remote view and all the way out into space. And if we see or sense in our consciousness an ET or an ET craft or a planet, we connect to it, and then there's a third phase, and that's what I call coherent thought sequencing. You flip that around where you're not just remote viewing them, you actually connect to them and then show them like you're zooming in with Google Earth. You show them where you are. So let's say that you're up in the high desert outside of a Joshua Tree or something. You show them North America, you zoom in, you come into the high desert, you show them Joshua Tree National Park, you zoom in, you zoom in, you zoom, and you just keep doing that and keep doing it and keep doing it in a coherent, everyone's doing this together. So that process can be 45 minutes or an hour if people have the sort of discipline to stick with it. Now, the other thing we do is that we have lasers, and you have to be careful never to hit an aircraft, but that we send up so that if our minds aren't very crystal clear, at least they see a very bright. So I have a laser that goes up very many miles up into space that we use. And then we also have a sort of little walkie-talkies that we send out these tones that were recorded in a crop circle. Colin Andrews of Crop Circle fame gave me. That's a very strange series of beeping tones. That's sort of our signature that lets them know where our group is. And we send that out on the radio. So we're using radio signals, laser light, and thought. Those are the three. It's like a triad. And those are all coordinated together out under the stars together. And it's quite amazing. And it can be done in any order. The main thing is the coherence of the group, frankly, and the depth of the consciousness, and the intent of the people. One thing I always tell people, I don't think ETs are interested in connecting with us to put on a show like dolphins at SeaWorld. I think there has to be a sincere wish on the part of everyone there to make contact for the greater good, not for just a selfish purpose. And the more that there is that selfless altruism operating, the more the ETs will respond. And that is something I've seen over and over and over again. So much of it has to, it's corny to say, but the kind of the purity of heart and purity of intent and simplicity of the purpose, as opposed to something that's, well, I'm going to throw out a lawn chair and I want them to show up and sort of excite me with some display in the sky or something that happens. That attitude results in zero results. Whereas a more sincere wish to make contact for interplanetary relations and interspecies relations for peace, that they respond to very rapidly. And I would advise people to take what I'm saying very seriously, because if people don't, they're going to be very disappointed. So a lot of it has to do with the intent of the people in the group, and that's why you choose your group carefully, frankly. Because you want it to be people who are of like mind and not people who are out there either out of fear or just wanting to be entertained with a sort of a show or display. Because, you know, they really are not going to risk coming into our airspace and being hit with a scalar military weapon just to entertain you. There has to be some larger purpose involved.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because intent is a very major thing with regards to contact. There's always bad apples in the group, and we do our best, especially when you have your 25 people retreats for 5 or 6 days, to weed out these bad apples. Because when you have people that come to the events, say in Joshua Tree a couple years ago, that are mocking things, that are saying, oh, they're not going to show up, or show me some cool light show, or having skepticism or being greedy, they're not going to come. You have to sincerely want them to be there and want to connect them in order for that to happen. I can't drive that point any more clear as you can. Let me ask you a question for all those that don't know. How can you differentiate between the ARVs and the actual ET vehicles, as well as the fake or man-made, I guess you could say, bioengineered robots versus actual extraterrestrials or interdimensional creatures?
Well, for a casual observer, it'd be difficult. I'll be honest with you. The great teacher here is experience, but some just, if it's a very close encounter, when you're dealing with an ET craft, it has no rivets and no seams and no visible parts. It also can be appear as like a hologram or light or just an energy field, and then pop into 3D in and out. That's very true. All the way, I had a conversation with Corso's family and stuff about the encounter he had at White Sands. Exactly that. ARV is going to have. It's going to look like a man-made manufactured item, because it is. Now, an ET craft actually is, the way it's manufactured, I mean, this is beyond the scope of the show, is not through digging up iron ore and melting it down and riveting it together like we do a Boeing 777. It actually is a standing wave, infra-ultrasonic sort of tone in the near astral, if you want to look at it that way, in the near materialized, but transdimensionally, and it actually materializes from that realm into this realm. And that's how they appear, and that's how they travel. So it's a very different way to say appear and travel. Now, the actual beings are even more distinctive, because the feeling of one of these menacing man-made ones is that A, they're menacing, B, they're invasive. They push in even if you're not comfortable, which an ET won't. Thirdly, if you look carefully, they even have a slightly robotic and strange way that they're moving, because they have integrated circuits in their neural complex. And these are the ones that are man-made, what are called aliens. And these are at close range. Now, at a distance, you may think, oh, what is that? But at closer range, it's quite obvious. And we have had encounters with actual ET beings, and there's on our website, if you click through the pictures, you'll see one that visited us up at Joshua Tree from the Andromeda Galaxy. And we've also had some of these others try to scare people on our team. Luckily, we were not scared, because we know what they were. Didn't scare us at all. It's kind of clumsy and ridiculous. So those are sort of the highlights that people can kind of take away. But actually, that would be an entire 4-hour seminar to get into all the details. But just remember, an ET object and a being, their technology is going to be so seamless and sophisticated. It's going to be very different from something that's made at Lockheed Martin up near Edwards Air Force Base and is coming out of the cube.
Let me just say this.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, the cube is the top secret Lockheed Martin facility up near Edwards.
Sort of like the skunk works now. We have about 10 minutes left. Let me say, first of all, you're so right about these rivets. People that have actually worked on real extraterrestrial craft trying to reverse engineer them said they're like injection molds. The entire craft comes out of just like a block, or whatever it's made of, and it's thought controlled. Another thing with regards to the beings themselves, none of them come here with menacing thoughts or to attack you or to hurt you. The real ones that I've heard of people that communicate with them and see them and deal with them on a regular basis are always talking about how loving they are.
Oh, sure, and they're incredibly conscious. It's like a level of almost enlightenment when you have a close encounter with them, even ones that look bizarre, because they're not all going to look like, the stereotypical alien look. I mean, that's just a myth, and the kinds of encounters our teams have had and the variety of species is kind of amazing. And so people need to understand that you kind of have to put aside every movie you've seen in video game and UFO book, because most of that information is a misdirect. And just go out there with a sort of a clean slate and an innocent, prejudice-free mind, because the more that you are in a state of just open-mindedness and see what happens, as opposed to projecting all the sort of caricatures onto the actual ET phenomenon, you're going to be, much better off if you're not doing that projection and just let it come objectively, and then you'll be amazed. I mean, the last book that there's a book that people can get through our website, SeriousDisclosure.com, that goes through, I don't know, something like 15 years of the contact we've had with our teams and the kind of phenomenon that's happened. It's a mind-blowing book, and it actually has a DVD that comes with it that shows some of the images of these. And I think people should get that and look at and read these accounts, because the accounts are beautiful, and they're also amazing because they're not at all what's usually associated in the UFO subculture, but these are the real contact events that thousands of people have had in our network. So I would encourage people to get that book and read it, because it goes through really great detail of how the event started, how it proceeded, how it ended, the way they looked, the whole phenomenon. And it happens on multiple dimensions. Sometimes, I remember one time we were up on Mount Shasta in California, and we were up in the national forest, and we were in this deep meditative state, and there was a pure crystalline tone that just manifested all around the circle, and every single person in their mind saw a spherical kind of grayish pearl white ET craft, but only in consciousness. With the naked eye, with open eyes, there's nothing visible. With the eyes closed, you could see this object moving through the circle, and the carrier wave was the tone. And this is very Vedic, by the way, the ancient Vedas, where tone and sound precedes light and form. And so when I take people on these week-long expeditions, it's really an in-depth course in this sort of science of consciousness, as well as the ancient Vedas and how manifestation happens.
And then they become ambassadors. Now, we have a little over 7 minutes left, so I'm going to try to cram as much as possible before I ask you again to plug in the event, website, and everything else. First of all, disinformation agents seem to be worse in America. Why would that be the case now, considering we're sort of dwarfed with Russia and China combined? I mean, their military, their money, us being the world police shouldn't even be a factor anymore. I mean, it's pretty disgusting. And I'm glad you mentioned the tones. They seem to be very, very important. And a lot of people actually picking up on this consciousness are recognizing that these tones, a lot of them have, I couldn't explain them scientifically, but a lot of them that you recorded from the crop circles, a lot of them having to do with geometry or nature, seem to resonate and do things to us and actually cause some of these beings down. Can you explain that?
Yes, well, it is, because it's very elemental. In other words, from pure unbounded consciousness, the first emanations are the sound component of thought, which is really what a mantra is. This is why music, singing, drumming, chanting, mantras are so important in all traditions and cultures throughout history for attaining these meditative states. So, but there's a corollary to that in terms of ET technologies and how things manifest and materialize. So frequently there is a very unusual tone that either accompanies or precedes an object materializing that's interstellar. And this is really amazing stuff when it happens. And it's happened hundreds of times with our group out under the stars in remote areas. So, and it's almost transcendent and beautiful. And when it happens, you'll never forget it. And that's why, that last book that I mentioned, the reason we created was that people can study that and learn how it really unfolds. And it's really beautiful.
And everyone I've spoken to, if you recall the last time we did this show and someone found out you were going to be on, actually emailed me and asked me to read the email to you on air. And it was a very loving email, and he wanted to express to you how much his life had changed. Every time someone attends one of these seminars, these week-long seminars with you, and have ET contact, their lives change forever. They become more loving, more giving, less selfish. And on top of that, they become ambassadors. At the end of the movie series, you actually show globally different people from different countries who are practicing CE5, which I think is fantastic, which is why this is such an important issue and why you are so important to the world of ufology, because you are going around the world and teaching them to get out of this primitive thinking and into this new quantum thinking and open up their consciousness so we can be invited to this galactic federation that's been waiting for us to stop
Well,
this.
yeah, they've been waiting a long time, by the way, because I think the human project is something that goes back hundreds of thousands to millions of years. But the time we're in right now, it's not just that we're in a global moment. We're in a universal moment, and I think that we're entering into an era that isn't just a new era or yuga, as it's called in the Vedas on Earth. I think it's a universal cycle. So I think we're actually entering into a time where you can almost forget about everything from the past, because what's emerging, I think, in the next century will be more different from today than today is from the caveman era or the Neanderthal era. So I think we're going to go through such an amazing transformation, but it isn't just happening on Earth. I think this is actually a universal phenomenon. And this is why, this is why there's so much potential right now. And I often speak of the fact that all of us on Earth today, I kind of joke, everyone between puberty and senility have the responsibility to sort of be the midwives birthing this whole new period in human history and on Earth as we become interstellar. And I think we have that, and really, in a sense, we're the last generation that can do it, because the Earth can't withstand the foolishness of how we've lived for the last few thousand years with warfare on it. But we're also the first generation. So in a sense, it is the alpha and the omega. We're the last generation of an old era and the first generation of a new cycle and a new era. And I think that's exactly where everyone on Earth is standing right now, whether they realize it or not. But people who really do realize it and then see the potential and the power of this moment, this point in time, if they step into that universal wave, it will carry you. And that's what's beautiful about what we're doing under the stars together.
It absolutely is, and this, I wish we had more time. We have to definitely do this again. It's always enjoyable to have you on. Listeners always enjoy you, and you are making an impact globally. Dr. Greer, I want to thank you. I also want to thank the listeners, and I want to give you the next couple of minutes to talk about the event again, plug in your website, and, of course, where people can get the ET contact tool and the network in case they missed it the first time around.
Sure, yes. So if you go to SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS Disclosure, all one word.com, you'll see that there's the event in November 21st in Washington, D.C. If you can't come to Washington, feel free to be there by webinar. There's going to be a really great webinar team that's hosting it. And you can sign up for that at our website, and it's going to be from 2 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time in Washington, so you can adjust for your time zone. It'll be a live webinar, and it's going to be on the Deep National Security State and how the secrecy is organized and what we can do to fix it. It's going to go into enormous detail. And then, for people who are interested in all this work with consciousness and the CE5, at the same website, if you scroll down towards the bottom right on the front page, you'll see there's a link to a training app, the ET Contact tool, that will help you develop this ability. And there's also a free app that's separate from that app, that's a training app, that will show you who's in your area. So anywhere you are in the world, you can put that app on your smartphone or on your computer and see who's nearby and connect with them to form these teams to go out under the stars. So all of that is there on the site, and invite people. And the other thing is that there's a place to sign up for our newsletters and information. It's a free service. You can just put your email address in there, and we'll send you information. We do not share or sell our email list. So if you want to sign up, you can do that also on our SiriusDisclosure.com site.
And you do have a lot of people that have joined. I know there's about, I think, 40,000 people that are on Twitter. Also
Yep.
on, I don't know what the numbers are on Facebook. I see you have, if I'm not mistaken, do you have Instagram as well? You do have,
we have LinkedIn. There's a LinkedIn site. There's Facebook, Twitter. I don't think we've done Instagram yet, but and then we have our website. We do have a big LinkedIn following, and also a large Facebook. Just one of our Facebook pages. We've done Instagram yet, but and then we have our website. We do have a big LinkedIn following, and also a large Facebook. Just one of our Facebook pages.
Pacific, this is Dr. K signing off.